next talk, Dr. Dempsey, would you care to introduce your students?
So just talk loud enough.
Or you can scoot it that way too if you like, however you want. It's pretty loud.
I have to introduce you first. So, hello everybody. Dr. Heidi Dempsey in psychology again. This is my student Harley Fields, who is doing research with a whole group of students on, they all looked at the dark personality traits. So if you come to lots of these, you're going to see a lot of posters on that. So Harley's specific piece that she was looking at is the relationship between age, emerging adulthood, empathy, moral reasoning, and the dark traits. So go for it.
Yeah, so we did mostly focus on the dark personality traits, but we were interested in some other things, including empathy and moral reasoning. And in some of my past developmental psychology courses, I had read some about the theories on empathy and morality kind of like developing as you age, including like Kohlberg's theory of moral development. And as far as the dark traits and everything, one of the first articles that I think that we read on dark personality traits was this article about the short dark tetrad and kind of going into, I guess, kind of like the process of how they were trying to make it like a valid way to measure like dark personality traits like psychopathy and narcissism, Machiavellianism, and sadism. And in that article that it had mentioned that age did seem to play kind of a role in the results and everything, that it was like a factor. And so that's what kind of got me, I guess, interested in like wanting to study the age differences in these things. When I tried to look more into age and dark personality traits though, I found that it is still a new thing in research. There has not been a whole lot of studies done on it, but I did find two that were really interesting. There was one that was by Bartlett and Marlette, and they kind of proposed the idea that maybe it's not necessarily age that kind of indicates whether or not somebody will have more or less of a dark trait or whatever, but maybe it's actually the characteristics of emerging adulthood. And that would also explain why Klimstra, the other study that I found, he found there was an increase in these dark personality traits in late adolescence, but then it peaks in like emerging adulthood, and then it just generally decreases as people age after that. So going into this, I knew that since our sample was going to be students from JSU, and that's pretty much just the emerging adulthood range, I knew that any, I guess, like differences or correlations or anything like that was not going to be as apparent in our results compared to like some of these other studies. But I still hypothesized that the youngest of our participants would show the most, or I guess higher scores on the dark personality traits, and also have more of the characteristics of emerging adulthood, and lower on empathy and moral reasoning, and then the opposite for the oldest participants. How we measured these things, there is, as far as emerging adulthood and measuring these characteristics of emerging adulthood, there is a questionnaire called the Inventory of Dimensions of Emerging Adulthood, and we used like a short version of that, but it kind of like assesses these 4 common characteristics, which are experimentation, negativity and instability, identity exploration, and feeling in between. And as far as like the dark personality traits, we used both the dirty dozen and the short dark tetrad. And both of those are kind of shorter questionnaires too. And in this table, what I included, I did not include like all of the results, because as far as the moral reasoning and everything, we did not seem to get any kind of correlations there. And for the dark personality traits, I only included the SE4 and not the dirty dozen, because there wasn't really correlations with the dirty dozen either. There was one smaller one with psychopathy, but in this table, this first one here is age, and then these are the 4 different traits, I guess, of emerging adulthood. These 2 are both from the questionnaire that we used for empathy, which was the QCAE for cognitive empathy and affective empathy. And then these 4 are from the short dark tetrad. And this is Machiavellianism, psychopathy, narcissism, and sadism. And as far as these results and the correlations, there is positive correlations, a couple, with the emerging adulthood traits, with some of the dark personality traits. And that would go with what I had hypothesized. However, for my hypothesis, I guess, for this to be consistent with it, they would also have negative correlations with the empathy, but that's actually the strongest correlations that we got at all, and they're all positive. So I thought that was interesting, and I'm really not sure how that happened, but for example, there's these 2 emerging adulthood traits, that there's experimentation and negativity and instability. And I do believe that those 2 specifically have been kind of known to correlate with some of the dark personality traits. And so that's why it does make sense why they both have positive correlations with Machiavellianism. But I don't know, I find it interesting. They both were also positively correlated with empathy too. But so we were not able to replicate the results of these other studies. But I do think that it is interesting that there was definitely a lot more correlations with the dimensions of emerging adulthood compared to like age. So that's kind of consistent with the Bartlett and Bartlett study, and I think that that would be an interesting thing to look more into and study some more, to also see if there's like other things that we tend to think change depending on what age we are and stuff, that it really might have more to do with like the presence of those dimensions of emerging adulthood, more than just age itself. We then also, because there was 40, I think 46, yes, 46% of our sample were freshmen. And so we compared the freshmen and the non-freshmen to see if there was any differences there. And the freshmen did score slightly higher on the Dirty Dozen's psychopathy scale. Yes, but I think that part of the reason that we unfortunately could not replicate some of these results and everything is because of the limited age range, and also I think 76% were female, so it was not the most representative sample either. But yeah. Are there any questions?
So you said your people are largely college students, I'm guessing? Is that what you said? So I guess that doesn't help us with age, right? Since they're mostly around the same age?
Yeah, that's what I knew that it would be within kind of it's basically the range of what is considered emerging adulthood.
Yeah.
Like around 18-ish to like early to mid 20s. And so I was hoping to kind of, I guess, get a better look at the change during emerging adulthood, if that makes sense. But yeah, unfortunately, I think most of the participants ended up being more like on the younger side. So the results didn't come out the way that I had hoped, I guess.
So I have one follow-up before anybody else jumps in, which is, do we get better or worse as we age?
Like with the dark personality traits?
Yeah.
We tend to get better. Like we show less of those dark personality traits as we get older. Except for it's just, yeah, like late adolescence, like late teens and stuff, they tend to show more of those a little bit until around their early 20s, and then after that it just like declines. Yeah.
Other questions for our speakers? All right, well, let's thank her.